You write some brilliant code, you put it out there to help the world, and then boom, you wake up one day to find out it's been weaponized. It's a nightmare, right? If you build software or release any kind of digital tool, you're creating serious power. But how on earth do you legally protect that power from falling into the wrong hands? How do you build a literal, impenetrable shield around your intellectual property? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack in today's explainer as we demystify the government and military restriction license. Let's dive in. So we're plunging straight into the deep end with a really high-stakes question. Who should not be allowed to use your code? Think about it. Let's say you build this incredibly slick, highly efficient logistics algorithm, purely to optimize grocery supply chains so people get fresh food faster. Sounds great, but what happens if that innocent code gets picked up by a shadow entity? Suddenly, an intelligence agency is using your grocery algorithm to optimize supply lines for an active military invasion. As a creator, you really have to ask yourself where your ethical boundaries lie, and exactly who you need to be locking out. This brings us to a concept called dual-use technology. Picture a standard delivery drone. Most days, it's just a friendly little bot dropping off life-saving medical supplies. But with just a few minor algorithmic tweaks, it becomes a heavily militarized tool for covert surveillance, or worse, active combat. That's dual use. Tools built for totally civilian purposes that can be flipped into weapons almost overnight. An AI designed to spot anomalies in medical x-rays could easily be flipped to identify high-value targets on a battlefield. Or cybersecurity tools built to defend networks, they can instantly become offensive weapons for cyberwarfare. These massively powerful systems absolutely need robust legal protection so they stay fundamentally safe. Okay, so how do we stop this dangerous flip from happening? Well, creators are increasingly turning to something called a Government and Military Restriction License, or GMRL for short. Simply put, this is a highly customized proprietary legal agreement that essentially slaps a giant restricted access sign on your software. It's explicitly designed to block usage by governments, militaries, defense contractors, intelligence agencies, or any sanctioned entities. Now, to be clear, this isn't just your standard universally recognized software license. It is a highly specialized strategic tool used to draw an absolute, non-negotiable operational boundary around your tech. You deploy a GMRL to hit some very specific objectives. For instance, you might use it to draw a hard line against military use, effectively guaranteeing your code never ends up inside a combat jet or an armored tank. Or maybe your focus is purely on export control, making sure your technology never crosses the border into heavily sanctioned or embargoed regions. Alternatively, your goal might be strictly ethical, meant to shield civilians from unlawful surveillance or human rights abuses. Ultimately, the whole point here is about controlling access to incredibly sensitive systems and keeping your tech far, far away from fundamentally harmful environments. But here's the reality check. A fancy piece of legal paper doesn't magically stop a bad actor from just hitting copy and paste on your source code. To truly protect your software, you've got to build an interconnected shield, and that shield relies on 4 distinct pillars working together. First up is copyright protection. Meaning, because you own the code, any unauthorized use is automatically copyright infringement. Second is contractual enforcement. Users have to actually agree to your strict terms before they ever touch your API. Third, we have technical protection measures. And fourth, export control and sanctions. Let's actually dig into those last two because that's where the shield really gets its strength. So legal restrictions are great, but they need serious technical teeth. Think of it like slamming a massive, heavy digital padlock onto your servers. The legal license gives you the right to restrict access, but hard-coded security measures give you the physical ability to actually do it. If an unauthorized group tries to ping your API from an embargoed country, boom, geo-blocking slams the door shut. If they somehow steal the code and try to run it on unauthorized weapons hardware, digital rights management, or DRM, instantly kills the execution. And you back all of this up with strict audit logs and access monitoring so you always know exactly who is holding the keys to your system. Then there's that final massive layer, export control and sanctions. This ties your custom license directly into the heavy, unyielding chains of international law. We are talking about massive global government frameworks here. In the US, you've got ITAR and ER strictly controlling the export of defense and military tech. Then you have OFAC handling global economic sanctions, which basically lists out the countries and individuals you are legally forbidden from doing business with. And violating these frameworks? Yeah, that isn't just a slap on the wrist. We're talking millions of dollars in federal fines and potential prison time. So your GMRL acts as a frontline contractual defense, forcing your users to legally swear they aren't crossing these very dangerous international lines. Now, actually drafting one of these licenses requires microscopic precision. It's kind of like assembling a Swiss watch. Every single clause needs to be engineered flawlessly. You start with clear license identification, title, version, owner. then you absolutely need precise definitions. I mean, if you vaguely define what a weapon system or a restricted entity is, your entire legal shield will literally shatter in court. You have to clearly outline the grant of license, telling users exactly what they can do, followed immediately by the restricted uses, what they cannot do. And finally, you lock the whole thing down with strict compliance obligations, demanding that your users actively maintain thorough screening and auditing on their end.
Speaking of restricted uses, this is where you outline your absolute non-negotiable red lines. These are the literal nightmare scenarios your license is aggressively built to prevent. You're legally banning your software from ever seeing a battlefield deployment. You are explicitly forbidding it from being integrated into guided missiles or complex weapon systems. You ban any autonomous combat or lethal use outright. No killer robots allowed. You lock out the creation of unlawful mass surveillance networks that track everyday civilians, and you strictly prohibit cyber warfare. If an entity uses your code to launch offensive cyber attacks, the license instantly terminates and they are squarely in breach of contract.
Okay, and then, usually tucked away near the bottom of this intense, heavily engineered legal document, you'll find a clause legally screaming at you in all capital letters, the software is provided as is without warranty of any kind. I always have to laugh a little at this one because it might seem pretty dry, but it is the ultimate defense mechanism. Basically, if your code is somehow misused, or a restricted entity manages to steal it and their military operation completely fails because of a bug, providing the software as is ensures you aren't held liable. You're putting it in writing, loud and clear. We make absolutely no guarantees, and we are definitely not on the hook to pay for your resulting damages. But listen, if you draft this text poorly, the gears of your legal shield are going to completely seize up. For example, vague definitions, they are virtually impossible to enforce in front of a judge. Throwing in totally impossible restrictions that no one could ever reasonably monitor just weakens the legal standing of the entire document. And if you have conflicting clauses, you're creating dangerous legal loopholes that a massive defense contractor's legal team will drive a Mack truck right through. Your legal language and your actual technical capabilities must be perfectly aligned, because if they aren't, you're just left with extreme operational ambiguity and a completely useless piece of paper. Now, there's a pretty massive myth floating around the tech world that we really need to bust right now. A lot of people confuse this with open source, but true open source software, as defined by the Open Source Initiative, is like a completely open gate. It generally cannot discriminate against anyone, not even a military force or an intelligence agency. A GMRL is an entirely different beast. It is a heavily fortified wall explicitly built to block military and weapons use. Because it actively discriminates against certain fields of endeavor, calling a GMRL open source is both factually and legally completely invalid. It is a highly protective, custom proprietary license designed specifically to keep bad actors out. So for this shield to actually work, it has to be incredibly visible everywhere. You can't just hide this thing in some forgotten subfolder and hope for the best. Plaster it right in your root license file and inject it directly into the header notices of your source code. On your website, it belongs right there in the footer and directly inside the download flow. Bake it into mandatory acceptance checkboxes on your software splash screens and feature it prominently in your developer portals. Visibility is absolutely crucial for enforcement. If your users don't clearly see it and legally agree to it, you simply cannot enforce it later. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a lingering thought. Imagine your code as this powerful, raw energy core, caught right in the middle between cultivating a better world or literally fracturing it into pieces. If you're out there building these powerful digital tools, what boundaries do you believe creators should be able to set on downstream use? We are living in an era where a few lines of code or a single AI model can literally change the trajectory of human society. Licensing goes way beyond just protecting your revenue stream. It is about taking back control of how your creations actually shape the future. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and keep exploring the incredible potential and the absolutely critical protection of the technology you built.